Good evening. So, where do we find true refuge? And how do we respond to the cries of the world? These are the themes we've been exploring in this. I think we're over the hump, past the halfway point now of this intensive. And we've been exploring refuge through the lens of a kind of reorienting refuge, not as a place that we go, really not even so much as an experience, but more as a way of engaging, a way of meeting our life. Meeting the world with open hands, with an open heart. And doing this requires a kind of reorienting, a shift from our usual entanglement with our ancient twisted karma. The ancient twisted karma of our personal lives and habits, and the ancient twisted karma that goes back and back and back to through our karmic lineages. And we turn toward the Dharma. We turn toward the inspiration of our Dharma ancestors, the Dharmic lineage, the people who walked the path before us, who showed us through their words, through their actions, that it's possible. It's possible to respond to enormous difficulty in ways that are skillful, that help alleviate suffering, our own, each other's, the world's. And as we allow ourselves to be inspired, to inspire means to breathe in, right? When we're inspired by something that seems to be out there, it's actually that something that seems out there is touching something deep in here. And there's a resonance. It wakes something up inside of us, and it's nourishing. So important in times like these, when it seems so difficult, maybe impossible, to continuously turn toward and find sources of true nourishment. And as we feel ourselves nourished by a sense of possibility, we find the courage to walk a path of living by vow. This is the path of the Bodhisattva. Bodhisattva is a wise, sensitive being who hears the cries of the world and doesn't turn away, but who is willing to roll up their sleeves and get to work. So a bodhisattva lives by vow. Living by vow means we live in alignment with what really matters, what we care most deeply about. It's a very vulnerable path, actually. especially when the vows we take feel impossible. We can't be sure that we'll succeed. But we don't do it because we're going to succeed. We do it because we care. We do it because we can. Bodhisattvas don't take impossible vows because they are nice people. They are wise people. Bodhisattvas understand the truth, the reality of our deep and inextricable interconnectedness. They get it. It's not really possible for me to wake up and be free while other people suffer. It's just not how it works. So we've been talking about bodhisattvas, and there are archetypal bodhisattvas. There are some in this room, I think. That's Avalokiteshvara over there, the bodhisattva of compassion. And in the Zendo downstairs on the altar, I believe we have Manjushri. I'm doing this for you, Roger. Manjushri is the bodhisattva of wisdom, who has the sword. Cuts through delusion, cuts through duality. And when wisdom and compassion come together, we have Samantabhadra, who is the bodhisattva of skillful action, ethical action, this capacity to engage. And we also have famous bodhisattvas. If you think about our collective human history, there are many people who you might look to, who you find inspiring. Several of us called up last night in the class the inspiration of Nelson Mandela, right? Who faced what perhaps seemed quite impossible, but who just kept going. Tonight, I want to talk about this third category of bodhisattva, which is what Uchiyama Roshi calls ordinary bodhisattvas. Kind of like us. We might say aspiring bodhisattvas. I sometimes think of this as hidden or secret bodhisattvas. These are all of the people who, whose names are not on the marquee. These are the people who don't make headlines, but who are quietly going about lending a hand, being helpful, doing their best. We live in a culture that tends to uphold, the teacher, the leader, the heroic figure, which is not a bad thing to do, and sometimes well-deserved. But in that orienting, we often miss the web, all of the other beings who are necessary, essential to support whoever it is that gets credit, Many years ago, I heard this wonderful story from Professor Dr. Jan Willis, who herself is a great bodhisattva. I had the privilege of teaching with her a few summers ago at Tassajara. She is a brilliant scholar, author, deep practitioner, 40 plus years, deep practitioner in the Vajrayana tradition. And she also is kind of a kick. She's a really fun, delightful human. So she tells a story about when she was in high school. She and some of her high school friends marched with Dr. King in the South. And the story that she tells, which has stayed with me for over a decade, is that when she and her high school friends would arrive at the location where people would gather before they were going out to march, knowing that everyone who was going to march practicing nonviolence in the face of potentially tremendous violence, right? Dogs and hoses and batons. So before anyone was allowed to go and march, they were vetted by these unnamed, unknown, mostly invisible in terms of history, what she called the church ladies. And the job of the church ladies was to meet with each person who was going out to march and make sure that they were settled enough, grounded enough in themselves that they could meet the potential violence and difficulty that they were intentionally going out to meet without losing their cool, able to maintain their vow of nonviolence. For me, this church lady story has become kind of a code for this beautiful possibility that, I told the story the other day of Avalokiteshvara as the one who has hands and eyes all throughout the body, right? The whole body is able to respond to the cries of the world, but it takes more than one of us, even if our whole body is responding. So the good news is there are church ladies everywhere. And we may not know about them, we may not hear about them, but we can begin to trust that there are many, many beings who are willing to turn toward and face difficulty to lend a hand to help out. In the Jewish tradition, there is a myth that captures this same spirit. It's the myth, the story of the Lamed Vav. Lamed Vav means 36. And in this version of reality, it's said that there always needs to be 36 bodhisattvas, we would say, for our purposes. 36 righteous beings on the planet in order to prevent the planet from tipping over into mayhem, chaos. We have to wonder just about now, right? We might be a little short. Maybe there's about 34. We're right on that edge, right? So these 36, the thing about the 36 Lamed Vav is that they're hidden. They're not wearing t-shirts. They're not announcing themselves as the Lamed Vav. And you know what that means. It means you don't know. Could be the person sitting next to you, or the person driving the bus, or the person doing the dishes, or chopping carrots, or bagging your groceries. Could be that that person is absolutely essential. And imagine how we might engage in the world if we held that as a possibility. But here's the other thing about the Lamed Vav. They don't know that they're Lamed Vav. They're hidden to themselves. And you know what that means? It could be you. Watch your mind. And say, oh, no, not me, or, oh, me. Right? each of us has the potential to show up in this way, to engage in the world from this place of vow, from a place of deep care and deep understanding about the truth that we need each other. And it's only together that we will find our way through the mess. So I want to share a story tonight about one of our ancestors who himself in some ways was a kind of, at least for a while, he was a hidden bodhisattva. His name is Daikan Eno Daosho. We chant his name as we do the names of the lineage. He's more well known in his more familiar name is the sixth ancestor, Hui-neng, who is reputed to have been the author of what's called the Platform Sutra, which was the kind of like the Bible of Chan, which became Zen in Japan during the Tang Dynasty, which was the golden era of Chan in China. Hui-neng was a poor, illiterate wood kindling seller. His father had been part of the court, and he fell out of grace, and the family was kind of banished to the south of China, which was at that time kind of the boonies. And then his father died, and he went out and gathered firewood and sold it in the marketplace to support himself and his mother. And the story goes, he tells his own story at the beginning of the Platform Sutra. It's his way-seeking mind, how he came into practice. And he says that one day he was in the marketplace and he overheard someone in one of the stores reciting the Diamond Sutra. The Diamond Sutra is one of the many versions of the Prajnaparamita literature, this great teachings on emptiness. Prajnaparamita is wisdom beyond wisdom. We chant it here as the Heart Sutra, a shorter version. So Hui-neng was wandering through the market, and he heard this line in the sutra. And the line read something like, a bodhisattva should arouse a mind that abides nowhere. And when he heard that line, something that he heard from the outside touched something on the inside, and he was inspired. Maybe he understood what it meant, maybe he didn't. I told the story the other day of me coming to Zen Center when I was in my 20s, and I was inspired. I felt something here. I didn't know what it was, but something got touched, and I had this feeling that's what I want, even though I didn't know what it was. And that's what happened for Hui-neng. He heard this line of the sutta, and maybe he understood it, maybe he didn't, but he said, oh, something woke up in him. And he found someone to care for his mother, and he went on this long pilgrimage to the north, to the monastery of Hongren, who was an expert in the Diamond Sutra. Hongren was our fifth ancestor. And he arrived there, and as is classic in Zen, the abbot, Hongren, said, where are you from and why are you here? And he said, I am from this little village in the south, and I want to be a Buddha. And Hongren said, you are a barbarian from the south. How do you imagine that you could be a Buddha? We don't really treat people this way anymore, you know? I watched the other day, I was waiting for the elevator and I watched Abbot David here greet someone who came to the door for the first time here at Beginner's Mind Temple. And he did say, "Why are you here? What are you here for?" And they said, "Well, I'm here for the talk." And he didn't say, "Ha, prove yourself." He said, "Oh, well, the talk isn't for another hour or two, but please come on in and have dinner. Join us for dinner." So we're much more polite now. But in those days, there was this kind of playful challenge tone that happened. So this abbot challenges Hui-neng. And Hui-neng says in response, "People may come from the north or the south, but Buddha nature is the same in everyone." Right? Pretty good. Again, imagine if we in our world today could hold that. Recognize that we may have different views, we may have different perspectives, but there's a fundamental humanity in all of us. Anyhow, Hongren recognizes something in him, but he sends him off to the kitchen. This is a call out to those of you working in the kitchen. The kitchen bodhisattvas. He sends Hui-neng to the kitchen to pound rice, to make food for the monastery. And for 9 months, he never goes to meditation, he never goes to hear the talks, he just works in the kitchen. Hidden away, this gem of a bodhisattva. And then at some point, Hongren has this poem contest. Maybe he's dying and he recognizes that he needs a successor. One version of the story I read, he thought that his monks were just a little too lackadaisical and he wanted to push them a little bit. Anyway, he challenged them to write a verse, a gatha, that expressed their understanding. And maybe they were a little lackadaisical because the story says that basically all the monks ceded. They didn't do the assignment. They ceded to the head monk, whose name was Shui. Let's see if I can get it right. It's an important name. Sui Shin. So Sui Shin writes a poem and he posts it on the wall. And the poem says, "The body is a Bodhi tree. The mind is a mirror bright. Constantly work to wipe it clean. Do not let dust alight." So all the monks read the poem. Hongren reads the poem. He praises the head monk for his effort. And he tells all of the monks that they should memorize this gatha and recite it. So they do that. Meanwhile, he calls the head monk to his chambers and he says, you're at the threshold, but you haven't yet entered the room. Ouch. And Hui-neng, who's been off in the kitchen working, he is illiterate, so he can't read, but he hears the monks who are chanting this gatha, and he asks about it, and one of his buddies in the kitchen takes him to the hallway where the poem is posted, and they read it for him, and then he asks them if they will write an alternate poem. This is a Tang Dynasty poetry slam. Right? So Hongren writes a second poem, and his poem says, "Originally there is no Bodhi tree, nor a mirror bright. Everything is fundamentally empty. Where can dust alight?" Now watch your mind. Do you have a preference? Do you like one poem better than the other? Or do you think, because Hui-neng was a sixth ancestor and he gets the robe in the bowl, that his poem is the better one? Maybe, because that is what happens, and that's mostly where the story goes, is we follow and we say, oh, you know, this poor Shui Xin, he lost the poem contest. Hui-neng, even though he had to flee in the night, he's given this robe and bowl in the middle of the night. This is the beginnings of what we still practice as the Dharma transmission ceremony that happens in the middle of the night. And Hui-neng has to flee because he's an illiterate peasant. And Hongren understands that even in the monastery there's all kinds of politics. And he's afraid for Hui-neng's life, so he sends him out. But the part of the story that we don't often hear is that both of them, Sui Xin and Hui-neng, become great teachers. You sometimes hear about the northern and southern schools of Chan. These are the schools of what are called gradual and sudden enlightenment. The northern school is the first poem, gradual, slow, steady effort. The southern school, Hui-neng's school, is the sudden enlightenment. Which one is right? We have a hint about which one is right because we know the story of Hui-neng. Right? Where did this story begin? It began with him hearing these words. A bodhisattva should arouse a mind that abides nowhere. We all have minds that want to abide somewhere, don't we? We want to know which is the right answer. We want to hold on to our opinions and our views. This is what Tia spoke about on Saturday. This practice of beginner's mind, of don't know mind, of the suffering that comes when we cling to our views and opinions. And this is the heart of the teaching in the story of Hui-neng, is he woke up, he had an initial big insight and inspiration when he heard about this possibility of a mind that doesn't pick and choose. Now, we all have a mind that picks and chooses. We all have a binary mind that wants to know, is it this or is it that? But the story, and again, this is demonstrated in Hui-neng's response when the abbot says, you think you could become a Buddha? You barbarian from the south? And he says, yes, there are differences. There is north and south. There is sudden and gradual. There are different flavors of practice. But in my own language, I would say, they're all good. And we don't need to pit one against the other in order to feel better about whichever our preferred style is. Right? And this is the heart of what we are practicing. We're learning how to sit in the middle of observing, confessing, admitting to a mind that wants to abide, to a mind that wants to say, this is right and that's wrong. This is good and that's bad. This is the way and that is not. This is automatic, happens all the time. We don't have to stop it. We don't have to get rid of it. We don't have to judge ourselves or blame ourselves. We just have to see it clearly. Oh, there it is. The mind that wants to abide. The mind that wants to hold on to this or that, that wants to know which one is it. It's kind of like, am I okay? That's what the mind is really saying. Am I okay? Yes, little mind, you're okay. Actually, you're way better than okay. Because as we learn to non-abide, as we learn to straddle, as the chant says, to straddle the merging of difference and unity, we find our seat. We find a place from which we can respond with skill, with kindness, with something fresh, rather than, the usual way that the mind responds. This is what Suzuki Roshi, in his inimitable way, said very simply and very powerfully as not one, not two. Do you see what happens in the mind? If it's not one, then it must be two. If it's not two, then it must be one. What happens when we meet both and? What happens when we begin to cultivate a mind that is open enough, fluid enough, honest enough, humble enough to see the habit of mind and not get caught? This is what sometimes called, comes from another Zen story, as we cultivate that capacity, we cultivate the ability for an appropriate response. An appropriate response is the answer to a question that comes from another Zen story. And this one is the answer from Hui-neng. Some of you who heard me talk over the last days will remember Hui-neng. Hui-neng was the one who was Mr. 80%. He asked his older brother, how does the Bodhisattva of great compassion use her 1,000 hands and eyes? It's the same question. How do we respond to the cries of the world? And he gave his answer, and he was playfully tugged at. His older brother said, it's pretty good, but you only got 80%. So this guy, just like Shui Xin, who didn't get the robe in the bowl, went on to become a great teacher. Hui-neng, Mr. 80%, he went on to become one of the most renowned Zen masters. And in this story, Hui-neng is at the end of his life. He has hundreds of disciples. He's well known for his pithy, sort of one-word answers or one-sentence answers that scramble that mind that wants to abide. So one of his students comes to him and says, as he is nearing the end of his life, tell me, what is the teaching of your entire lifetime? I always think it's kind of rude, isn't it? The old guy's dying. But the disciple is sincere, right? He wants to know. His teacher's going to go, and he wants to know, what's the essence, right? What is the teaching of your entire lifetime? And Hui-neng replies, an appropriate response. I loved this story. I loved it so much that after I lived at Zen Center for a while and left, I named my business Appropriate Response. It's kind of funny, isn't it? Appropriate Response LLC. But it was my nod to, this is what we're really looking for. We may think we want whatever it is you think you want, but what we really want is to be able to respond. Anyhow, I loved this story so much that I asked one of my teachers, what is the Chinese character for appropriate. Reverend Shinmu and I, last night after the class on the 4 Bodhisattva vows, it turned out that I have a copy of the vows that someone had written out for me a long time ago in the Chinese characters. And we looked up each of the last characters, because each character we translate it as a single word, but it often has a very rich texture and meaning. Anyhow, what's the Chinese character for what's translated into English as appropriate? And my teacher said it's 3 characters. Meet, each, teach. This is what it means to respond appropriately. That we meet. We meet means we meet with beginner's mind. We don't carry all of our ancient twisted karma with it and project it onto the moment. Or if we do, we confess, we notice, we go, oh, there I am doing that. So that we can meet the moment, again, with open hands, with an open mind, with an open heart. And what do we meet? We meet each. We meet each, we meet the uniqueness of each moment, each fresh moment. And when we meet each moment in this way, it becomes a teacher. Those of you in the class will recall, Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. This is another version of this willingness to meet everything in our life, whether we like it or we don't, as a teacher, as an opportunity to learn. Here's the secret in this, which is that the character, each, is ichi or itsu. It's a single stroke. And that character is translated both as each, as in the unique particularity of each moment, each breath, each person, each experience. It's also translated as oneness. And here it is, difference and unity, right? Particularity and sameness, all together. This is same character as in my Dharma name, Monitsu Anka. It means listening to each thing, peaceful transformation. Listening to oneness, peaceful transformation. Can we sit with both? I have this memory of right after my Jukai ceremony, and I had been given this new name, someone was asking me about it, the name, and I was explaining, well, here are the characters, and here's what it means. Listening, mon, to each thing, mon itsu anka, peaceful transformation. And I heard this voice shouting from actually the abbot's room in the Gaitan at Green Gulch. It was Blanche Hartman. And I was translating it as me listening to each thing, peaceful transformation. And she was shouting from the room, oneness, oneness. So which one is it? Can we live into the fullness of that yes? Can we open our hands, open our hearts, open our minds to this fullness of reality, which, here's the thing, I have 1 minute left. Here's the thing. In my mind, that both and, my mind thinks that's way too complex. What's simple is this or that. But, much to my surprise, what I've discovered, not in my mind, but in my direct experience, is that when we can hold both, what arises is not complexity, it is this stunningly radical simplicity. All of the tug and pull of that binary mind goes quiet. And what's left is what we would say in Zen, just this. This just is it's the just of just sitting, of shikantaza, of not adding anything extra. So I'll leave you with what is for me one of the most beautiful articulations of what I'm trying to point to here. This justness, sometimes called ta, thusness, suchness. And you'll hear it here in Suzuki Roshi's words. These are the closing lines of Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. And he nails it. Here's what he says. We must have a beginner's mind, free from possessing anything. A mind that knows everything is in flowing change. Nothing exists but momentarily in its present form and color. One thing flows into another and cannot be grasped. Before the rain stops, we hear a bird. Even under the heavy snow, we see snowdrops and some new growth. In the east, I saw rhubarb already. In Japan, in the spring, we eat cucumbers. Thank you very much for your kind attention.